It's really important that people as individuals reaffirm their own connection with the sacred.
We say the salmon gave us our voice, and so we always have to speak for the salmon because they can no longer.
We have to look at the earth as a living organism, figuring out what nature needs, and then we do our best to try to mimic that.
We're working with Beaver because we want to restore watersheds.
When you bring back the trees, you bring back life and you bring back the underground water.
All the land in the city can be retrofitted to capture water and store it.
Conservation, reuse, and water use efficiency. They are the greatest untapped sources of water in this nation.
You know, you can't talk about the water cycle without talking about soil health.
If we designed our landscapes so that the water is captured, spread out, slowed down, and soaked into the soil, when rain doesn't come back for the next 5 years, we've got it down in the soil.
How can we continue to practice agriculture, but do it in a way that rather than contribute carbon to our atmosphere, we're contributing it back to our soil?
Every time we graze a pasture, they're fertilizing, but then we're also able to grow a whole herd of sheep on the same piece of property.
You're trying to create biodiversity in all of its forms.
We're trying to reverse desertification and heal 1 billion hectares of land.
When you're getting food from an urban farm, you're looking at an expression of love.
Supporting small-scale farmers, wasting less food. These are all things that you can start today with your next meal.
We stand at this radical junction point where we get to reevaluate who and what we are as a species. We have this opportunity to rediscover that all life is sacred.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Savory Institute live stream webinar. I'm Bobby Gill, Savory's Director of Development and Communications. And today I am here with our special guest, Brittany App, director, filmmaker, producer, narrator, writer, cameraman, all the things of the new documentary, Where There Once Was Water, Stories from California. And also another special guest that I'm going to bring on screen is Abby Kingdon-Smith. Abby is here on the Savory Institute team as our global network coordinator, but she also wears multiple hats, and she leads the Savory Institute hub in Northern California, the Jefferson Center for Holistic Management. So Brittany, Abby, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you.
Yeah, well, so Brittany, I was really excited when I learned about this film. Abby obviously told me about it because Abby happens to be one of the stars of the film. You cover the Jefferson Center in this film, along with a host of other storylines, which I think people got a little taste for in the trailer that we just saw there. But, you know, so we sent out a link to all the Savory Network members to watch this film ahead of time. So if you're a Savory Network member, if you're a hub, an educator, a regenerating member, you got to watch this movie for free. You should have had that sent to you within the past few weeks. For everyone else, you go to wherethereoncewaswater.com and you will be able to watch that at some point in the future. And I guess Brittany will probably tell us about that. But Brittany, why don't you kick things off a little bit and tell us a little bit just about why water? Why did you want to make a film about water? I know in the environmental space, there's so much discussion about carbon and wildlife. You know, there's so many different facets. What led you to make a film about water?
Yeah, this is my very first film. And so, you know, one of the running jokes about it, a friend was like, hey, great. So I don't know, could you have picked a bigger topic for your first film? Maybe God is the only bigger topic you could have chosen. And the reason I chose such a gigantic, expansive, literally, you know, all-encompassing topic is because I saw with my own eyes in countries other than here, first was my first exposure, what life looked like when a family is living without access to clean running water. And that happened for me. I was hired on as the shipboard photographer for a study abroad program called Semester at Sea, which is amazing. You get to live on a cruise ship that has been converted into a floating university campus. You spend a whole semester sailing around the world, and your field work is done in country. So we stopped in 10 different ports, and the students, there's 600 something undergrads. There's about 65 staff and faculty, and then a gigantic crew keeping the ship running and keeping all of us fed. And I was one of the staff members. Very, very cool job. But when we were in India and Africa and, a few other places, I remember the moment where it really just finally hit, because I kept seeing, you see women hauling water, and it's always the women and girls across the world. The responsibility for hauling water falls on women and girls. And that means really for a lot of little girls that they don't get to go to school. They spend their whole day hauling water. And I remember in a small rural town in India, we were in a bus and we were, moving from one spot to another to go do, I think it was a day we did a big service project at an orphanage there in the town. And I looked out the window and there was this woman, my mother's age, squatting in the street in a muddy puddle and doing her laundry. And that was it, because that's the only option, right? And the water was not clean, and I don't know that the clothes come out cleaner afterwards, but seeing my own mother in that person was it just really sat with me. And I came home not even really knowing how to do life, right? Like, why, recognizing my own privilege to a place where it was almost paralyzing. And I would take a shower and then sit on the porch with a glass of wine and realize, like, it took more water to make this glass of wine, and I just used more water in that shower than any of those little girls will ever see in their entire life. And that lit a fire in me to try to figure out how to do something, how to help, how to be a part of this story that felt right and good, and how to use my privilege that was now so obvious to me, in a good way. And I thought, well, if I do something crazy, I could probably raise a bunch of money. I could donate it to a nonprofit that's already doing that work. And so, long story short, the crazy thing I chose to do was to ride a bicycle across the United States of America with my friend Gar, who is also the editor on this film that we are talking about today.
Not to interrupt you, but how long did it take you to ride your bike across country?
No, that's a great question. It took 3 months. It was a long bike ride. Yeah, and we carried all of our own stuff, and we carried our own water, and we camped along the way, and we were able to raise $15,000 for a group called Water Aid. And, that provided 500 or so people with access to clean running water for the rest of their life. That was the first chapter for me, was this 3-month bike ride through the southern United States. And we started in September. And if you try to ride a bike through Arizona in September, you've become very aware very quickly of why water is important. I mean, there were days where, like, by 9 o'clock, we couldn't even be on the road anymore because you couldn't stop on the road because your tires would melt into the asphalt. So anyway, that's how we got here. That was the first chapter. Second chapter was, crazy drought in California in 2014. And with the bike ride behind me, I was like, okay, well, what's next? Why the disconnect? Why is my neighbor across the street power washing his boat in his driveway, and all the lakes are going dry? Like, and so it just, at that point I thought, okay, well, now I have to do something else. I'm not going to ride a bike across the country again. We got to switch it up. So this film began as a photography project trying to chronicle the disappearing bodies of water in the state of California. And it grew from there.
Yeah. How did that grow? What was your discovery process like? So you obviously had a passion for this. You saw it firsthand of the woman washing her clothes in that puddle of water. And then, you biked across country to do something about it. But how did you find your storylines? How did you, did you have a strong sense of, what was going on with the water crisis that we're facing and broken, ineffective water cycles? Like, do you feel like you had a strong command of that, or were you
No.
just like diving head in and be like, what's the water situation and who's got stories that I can learn
Yeah,
from?
always a student,
Yeah.
a student, right? I live my life in that way, eternally curious, and if we follow the passion, then our curiosities are hopefully serving us and the world as best as they can. Yeah, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, Bobby. I had no idea. I had some cute ideas about how easy it would be to solve all the problems. Like, sure, let's all take shorter showers, and this will be a great conversation piece specifically for this group, but let's eat less meat, or let's stop eating meat altogether, and that'll solve all the problems. Cute, easy conversation piece, not necessarily true. Not that simple. So, and I feel like on this side of it, what I realize is there could be 500 different films about water just in California. Do we want to talk about who's got all the money and who controls where the water goes? Do we want to talk about, specifically just ecological restoration? There is a film out right now that's all about beavers. There could be a film all about salmon. There could be a film all about the Winnemem-Wintu. And there is one of those films also. There could be 500 different films depending on what piece of this puzzle you want to touch. And what I found was I was trying to touch too many pieces of the puzzle, and the puzzle was getting too big and complicated, and then I'd have to reel it in, and then it would get bigger, and then I'd reel it in. And so where the story has finally landed feels really good and feels like the appropriate story for me to tell. And really, it is also a way to share my journey, right? Like, I am a different person now than when I started making this film. And kind of the call in the film is like, let's all write a story together that we can feel good about. And sometimes that'll be uncomfortable. Sometimes it'll be easy, right? But now I'm rambling. Reel it in.
That's quite all right. We've got plenty of time here. It's A-okay. So you approach things as a student, a lot of different possibilities. At some point, you found the Jefferson Center for Holistic Management, all the way up in the very northeast of California. Is that right, Abby?
Correct. Northeast. We're right on the border of Oregon and Nevada. Yep.
So tell us a little bit, set the stage for that exploration, the exploration of that storyline for the film. And, I'd love to hear, Brittany, your perspective of this, and then Abby, yours as well.
There was a narrative that was really common and that I had been, grabbing onto and following for quite some time. Like, oh, okay, if we eat less meat, specifically beef, we can have a much smaller water footprint. Okay. So when I was on my bike trip, vegetarian Brittany, doing it for the planet, doing it for the water. Not gonna eat any more beef. Not gonna eat any more meat at all. I'm gonna save all the water. And curious, eternal student, I'm gonna interview people about that. Like, tell me about that. Tell me about your vegan plans to save the planet and how that works. And then I thought, well, then I need to interview the other people. And also, if the planet has always had animals, then the planet probably needs animals, and probably needs animals to be healthy, right? So that was me confronting my own bias and confronting the very common, very popular storyline that I was consuming and or being fed or just was in the air at that time.
Yep.
And I thought, gosh, okay, there's got to be a way to raise cows, sheep, whatever, that benefits the soil, because this is how the Dust Bowl happened. We took the bison off the land and now dust everywhere, right? If we really want to simplify things. That's the whole story of the Dust Bowl. No more bison, lots of dust.
That's all you need to know.
That was it. That's the whole thing. So So I wanted to find that because I knew like animals and land go together. Animals, plants, land, healthy soil, water retention in the soil, it all goes together. So there's got to be somebody doing that in California, which led me to seek out and find the Savory Institute. I'm sure as a lot of people do. I heard the TED Talk. And I went, yes, here we are. And then, there's hub farms. Is there one in California? Oh, there is. Barely in California. Can we go in? We can't go any further or we'll be out of California. And so that's how I found the Jefferson Center. And I reached out to them, and I'll hand the story off to Abby at this point because it is pretty hilarious. Kind of the back and forth that we had, like, should I try? Do we trust Brittany? Do we a little nervous? So I'll pass it off there. That's how I found them.
Yeah. So that was 2016, Brittany, when you reached out.
Oh my gosh, was it? It probably was.
So yeah. So I wasn't even in this role as the Savory Institute Global Network Coordinator. We were just starting the hub. We'd moved up here from Reno, getting settled, and all this was so exciting and new. And we have, Maisie was so young, and so I remember getting this email, and I call Spencer. I'm like, "What do you think about this? There's this like, this filmmaker who wants to come visit us." And of course, like the first reaction is like this ego stroking, right? Like, oh my gosh, we get to be part of a film and blah, blah. And so that's my headspace. And Spencer's like, wait a minute. So we talked to the Savory Institute team about it. My friend Bobby and my colleague Chris Kirsten, he was like, wait a minute, she's a vegan. And he Googled Brittany. And they've done this research, like, oh, she's a vegan.
And some context here. This was years ago. This was around the time when the movie Cowspiracy came out. And so
and that's why
ranchers in California that we know had gotten burned by filmmakers that were doing gotcha documentary filmmaking to, pretending like they were going in to tell a regenerative ag story. And then they go in and they spin it and then they edited it in a way that made them look bad. So I think rightfully so, some people were cautious at the time because that had just recently happened. Thankfully, Brittany was not doing a gotcha film, at least not that I was able to.
But nobody knew that at the time. Like, why would you trust some ex-vegan hippie chick making a film about, I mean, why would you? But they did. So lucky me. Lucky me. That. Go ahead, Abby. Carry on.
It's just so funny because I feel like I know you so well now, and it's just so funny to think back to not knowing you and like that. Like how dogs like circle each other and they kind of like check each other out. I feel like there was a lot of that going on, and so we decided to go forward. But we put together we had a lawyer friend just draw up some sort of legal thing for us, saying that we would have that you weren't going to misrepresent and use this out of context, and we would have the right to review this and blah blah. So we were both comfortable with that, and then we went forward. So I think there was some good boundary setting that we did in the beginning, and gave us a strong foundation for a good healthy relationship. But once I think you got there, it was like, oh, this is going to be okay. This is fine. But before you got there, we were doing a lot of
out. We were all scared of each other. It was, I love that we could joke about it now. And I still hear that from Spencer. He'll be like, oh yeah, that was back in the scared of Brittany days. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. And then also when I came up to visit that first time, it was a workshop weekend, and I was no longer vegan or vegetarian at that point, but it was in, within the few past years, it was on my record, so to speak, in the time of Cowspiracy, which was all like, what's that phrase? Just too soon. It was too soon. But you guys had a barbecue and poetry and music on the closing night. And I remember Spencer watching me like put the beef on my plate and put the beef in my mouth. So funny. So funny.
You had to prove yourself to make
I had to
sure
prove
that,
it. Yeah. Like, is she gonna eat the flesh from the cow? Is she gonna do it? Oh, she's doing it. Oh, okay.
I feel like I should frame the conversation and just as a caveat say, the Savory Institute does not judge you based on your dietary choices.
Right.
Anyone that is watching here, we love everyone. Everyone can support grazing and, proper grazing of global grasslands for planetary health. It doesn't matter what you eat to do that. So, we'll just put that out there.
Yes, no, that is a good disclaimer. And nobody wants to be told what to eat, right? So
yes, very true.
That is a very personal decision that we all get to make for ourselves. And there should be no judgment in it. Where it gets messy is claiming that this is the one way to save the whole planet and all the things, and everyone else is wrong. Because that's not correct. And your group knows that better than anybody else, but how are you going to grow a gigantic field of soy in a way that's as good for the soil as moving cattle around on the landscape? So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, guys, I see that we have a special guest in the waiting room that I believe is going to be joining us. And so this is another one of the stars of Where There Once Was Water, bringing to the stage Maisie Smith, Abby's daughter.
Hello.
Hi, Maisie.
Hey, Maisie. How you doing?
Good, thanks. How about you?
Now that you're here, I'm doing fantastic.
All better now, Maisie.
Yeah. So for everyone watching, Maisie is Abby's daughter, and she is one of the stars of the film. If you've had a chance to watch the film, you probably saw, because this was like 6 or 7 years ago now that you made this. And so, Maisie, you're 11 years old now. This was like half of your lifetime ago that you were filming, right?
Yeah. Now that I think about it, yes.
Yeah, because you're so small, but you're so cute, because in the film, you're just out there dancing in the field doing your thing. And I actually had to pause as I was watching the movie because I was laughing, because I thought it was so funny that you were dancing in the film, and my wife was wondering what I was laughing at. So you were the hit.
Yep.
And so, Maisie, I want to ask you a few questions since you've popped on to join us for a few minutes. First off, what's it like to be a movie star?
Well, it was really cool. It's funny how much I remember actually being in the film. Like, I remember hanging on side by side, having Brittany film while we're going down into the pasture, and I can remember me hanging off the side of one of the handlebars on the side by side, and I thought that woman who was making a film and my family was in it, and it was the coolest thing in the world.
I would agree. I think it is the coolest thing in the world. And that was going to be my follow-up question is, Maisie Smith, can I have your autograph?
Oh, Bobby.
Okay. Well, I know we only have you for a few minutes, Maisie, but what was your favorite part of being in the film and having Brittany out there?
That I got to show, of course, this is my 6-year-old me talking. I got to show this woman that was going to film about my family, my entire ranch, and that my family got to be in it, and that my dad was showing the world about how amazing soil and beef can be.
Yeah, amen to that. And you know a thing or two about that, right? Because, Maisie, I've been with you when we were in Zimbabwe at Alan Savory's ranch. I've been with you in Costa Rica. You come out to a lot of the Savory Institute team meetings. And so, what have you learned? What do you want to talk about with your world travels, that you've seen? Because you've spent a lot of years traveling the world with the Savory Institute team. Anything you want to share with us? Like any favorite stories?
This takes place actually in not anywhere around the world except for our little ranch. We were walking through the fields, and Brittany was walking behind me and my dad, or something like that. And she was filming us. And my dad was walking around and talking, and he tripped over something, and he caught himself. But when we looked again, it looked like he had almost face planted into a cow pie.
It's times like those that we wish that Brittany was there with her camera out. Right? that would have been a really good clip to add into the film, I think.
Yeah, that would have been a good outtake, huh?
Yeah.
I don't know if Spencer would agree, but you and I would agree.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
You're awesome,
Maisie. Any last words before we let you go? Because I know you've got a lot going on. Anything you want to say to the audience who's watching today?
I just want to say thank you guys for watching and being willing to learn more about water and the Savory Institute, because I personally believe the Savory Institute can change the world.
Oh, Maisie, I love you, girl. All right. Thanks, Maisie.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks,
Bye.
Maisie.
Bye, Angel.
Oh, she's awesome.
Oh, my word.
Oh, my goodness. I did a few feedback screenings along the way as I was making the film. And, you know, I'd show a rough cut and then I'd hand out forms and ask people for feedback, all kinds of feedback. Favorite scene, least favorite scene, what's confusing you? How do you feel at the end of this film? All sorts of questions. The answer to like favorite moments in the film multiple times was little girl dancing in the field. More of that, please.
Awesome.
Yeah.
She's so great. She provides such a needed moment of levity. But at that point in the film, it's like, oh, yes, we've just learned a lot of stuff. I need to laugh a little bit.
Yeah.
She's great.
She's fantastic. I feel like we should have a whole side conversation about Maisie and Abby, how you've raised such an incredible, worldly, you know, intelligent little girl, but she's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh. So I'm curious, Brittany, in developing this film, you know, so you found the Jefferson Center, and it sounds like it was transformational for you in terms of being able to see livestock be raised in a different way that perhaps you didn't fully understand previously or didn't fully appreciate previously, you know, coming from a vegetarian, vegan, hippie background. And so I'm wondering how else was this film transformational for you? Because it was over the course of many years. So I imagine those instances were probably numerous.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to go even further back, I was actually raised on barbecue. I just had a moment of veggie and now I'm back to my roots. So it's not like I was raised on soybeans. No judgment if you are. No judgment, but that was the reason I made that specific dietary choice was for water, which is why this is such an important part of the story. Because what I found through making this film is that I think the biggest, 70% of our fresh water goes towards our food. So what we eat is a very big deal. It's a very big part of this conversation. So if we're talking water, we have to be talking food and we have to be talking how we grow our food. And so I set out to make this film about water, and in equal parts, I made a film about soil. Because if we don't have living soil, then there's no place to store the water and hold the water, and it all just rushes off. And so, this thankfully, this thing that's getting much more popular now, regenerative agriculture, restorative agriculture, holistic management, mob grazing, there's a lot of different words for it. Regenerative organic, biodynamics, all these methods that focus in equal measure on growing food and soil is how we grow food with less water. So if your soil is alive, it holds the water and you don't have to add a bunch of water to it. And that is true whether you are growing kale or beef. If your soil is alive, it will hold on to the water that lands on it and it won't all go rushing off. And I guess a way that this has all, to try to bring it back to your question, a way that this has all influenced my personal life, after bouncing around all over the state, learning all that I could about water, interviewing as many different diverse, points of view as possible, there's so much that I learned. And what I found myself really, really drawn to is sheep on the land. I love the sheep. I love the sheep. So now I have sheep and alpacas and ducks and a Great Pyrenees dog. And I live in a very I live in an arid grassland environment. I don't know what I'm doing. This is all new to me. But again, eternal student, following the curiosity, following the passion, starting with 2 U's, right? Because if I can keep them happy, healthy, and alive, and then we've got, hopefully I'll have some lambs in the spring. Start small, see how it all feels, see how it fits. Maybe I'll end up grazing animals on the landscape out here. Maybe I won't. But of all the things I learned in this film, I think the our potential to do the most good is in how we manage animals on land. So if we are going to eat animals, it matters a lot where those animals come from, how they are raised. Because you're either doing a whole lot of damage or a whole lot of good. And there's not a lot of room in the middle, right? The pendulum is like, whoa, bad news, water pollution, sick animals, fed all sorts of things they shouldn't be eating, or like, wow, holy crap, look at that grass is as tall as my head. Why? Because you're managing the animals on the land with your priorities straight, right? Healthy animals, healthy soil, healthy water, healthy springs. Everything can continue cycling as nature intended because we're not getting in the way, right? We're facilitating. We're facilitating a healthy functioning ecosystem instead of just like trying to boss our way into it and force land and animals to do things that are not natural. That's been absolutely the biggest takeaway for me. So going from someone who's like, I'm going to stop eating all the meat because it'll save the water, I'm now like, I'm going to raise and harvest my own animals at home so that I can be as intimately connected to my food as possible. So turns out we can change. Turns out we can learn new things. And it's been a really, it's a process I'm really grateful for. It's been a rather intense and transformational journey making this film. Because beyond just the food, I was able to connect with local tribes here to the Southwest and California and learn more about, again, the privilege I hold as a white person and my responsibilities as a white person to include, but more importantly, to center Indigenous voices in the work that I do. Lift up, center, hand the microphone over, right? It's so important that we listen to the Indigenous people that have been here the longest, because they really do know. They really do know how to take care of the land, the animals, and the rivers and the ecosystems, and they know why salmon are important to the rivers and can teach us that in a way that comes from hundreds, thousands of years of relationship. So there's just so much, and I'll pause on that because I've probably answered your question more than, and we'll continue rambling. But I mean, making a film is a really good way, if you're open to it, to stretch yourself out of your comfort zone and try to find the truth. That's what I'm always trying to.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you bringing up the Indigenous land management piece. Have you read the book Tending the Wild? It's all about Indigenous land management practices throughout California.
Can you say that again? My internet got weird.
Oh, you crapped out. Have you read the book Tending the Wild? It's all about Indigenous land management practices all throughout California that have existed for millennia.
I have not, but I'm going to literally write it down right now because I will
proper
be
usage of the
book.
word literally.
Oh, stop. Tending the Wild.
Yeah, Tending the Wild is a great book, but I think it's a wonderful example of, just like you were saying, going back to who are the stewards of this land, when there were all these massive herds of bison roaming around, and when the Europeans arrived and they started, moving westward and thinking they had discovered all of this incredible, land that was just wild. in actuality, it had been actively managed. There was that active human management component that had been happening for such a long time. And that's what provided these vast forest gardens and these, these moving herds through prescribed burning and, all these other sorts. So it's a great book if anyone's ever read it.
Relationship, right? I mean, that's all about relationship. And and that's why I love the work that you guys do at the Savory Institute, because it seems that I think it would be nice to toss it to Abby at this point to kind of elaborate on this further, but like just the relationship, all of them, right? Relationship to the animals, relationship to the community, to the land, to the seasons. I mean, if we are separate from, which in modern days, that is much of how we move through the world. We separate and try to dominate and control. And
well, there's this perspective that we feel that we as humans are separate from nature. And the reality is we are an interconnected part of nature, and everything that we do has an effect on nature, whether we believe it or not. And we are a part of that nature. So whatever we are doing it back to ourselves. And I think that's that holistic part that comes into holistic management for sure. But Abby, please, if you have anything to add on that, and just so you guys know, I'm going to open up the chat. So I'm going to pop the chat onto the screen. So everyone watching on Facebook and YouTube, if you post a comment, that will show up here on the right side of the screen, and we will answer questions as they come in. But as that happens, Abby, anything that you'd like to mention as it relates to relationship?
I just think, I mean, Bobby, you and Brittany are two of my favorite people. Listening to you speak about these topics is just so inspiring for me. And I think you're both such powerful people. And talking about this, that just the willingness you have to transform your life in pursuit of truth, in pursuit of learning, is unbelievable. And I think that makes you so powerful and such a role model for all of us. Like, what if we all could go out and pursue truth and questions in our lives instead of staying in our lane so much and staying so comfortable? Speaking of discomfort, when you were talking about this book, Tending the Wild, Bobby, it reminded me of something that I think points to my own transformation. And it's kind of embarrassing, actually, but I'm going to share it in hopes that it inspires others to be vulnerable and honest about their own learnings and unlearnings, which I think are equally important for privileged white people like myself. That book was actually given to us years ago, to Spencer and I years ago, and I never picked it up. It was given to us by a friend who was advocating for Indigenous rights in California, and she attended one of our Raising for Change conferences in California. And now I look back and think, wow, what courage she had. But she stood up in this room filled with farmers and ranchers in California, mainly white men and with cowboy hats. No offense to any of those, but I'm just, painting the picture of what. So she stands up, this woman from San Francisco stands up in this room at Chico State in the ag department. And she talks about how important it is to recognize ancestral lands and the rights of Indigenous people and the ways that they had managed land for so long. And I remember my thought of of the event, someone wanting to deeply build relationships with landowners so that we could do our work of holistic management, and someone who went through school and taught, in history class that was kind of over, it was really horrible what happened to the Native Americans, but that's over now. And now we're moving on, right? I think that, to me, that was the story that I was taught. And so I'm like, God, why is she bringing this up? This is so embarrassing, right? That was my first thought of I was cringing at how they were going to respond to her. And I remember a similar thing at the Grass-Fed Alliance conference. Bobby, you and I were there a few years ago in Santa Rosa. And we did a whole opening ceremony with the Indigenous culture from that area. And it was again a room filled with cowboy hats. And I was cringing, like, oh my gosh, how is this going to go? But that discomfort is so important to lean into. And now I think, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I think it's so important. And it's, I've been through, like Brittany, a relearning and unlearning process. And I think we need to have these type of conversations. And thank you, Brittany, for leading and being an example of how you can unlearn and relearn at any age.
Yeah, love that. Thank you, Abby.
Yeah.
It looks like all of a sudden questions started rolling in, as people can see from the screen. Let's focus on this question from Lee Lindsay on YouTube. Brittany, you mentioned your journey. Not everyone can make movies or have sheep. What can people with land or expensive equipment do to support better water practices?
I love that. Okay, so to be clear, I have no expensive equipment. Well, my cameras are expensive, but I haven't upgraded them in years. So I made this whole film with the equipment I already owned as being a professional photographer, but that's not the question. It's just like, let's be scrappy. Let's do what we can with what we have, and sometimes it's not much. So 40% of our water goes into what we eat. Sorry, 70% of our fresh water goes to what we eat. 40% of food in the US gets wasted and thrown away and ends up in the landfill. And if that doesn't give you a knot in your stomach, I don't know what will. So if you think about that, 70% of our fresh water goes to grow our food, and then 40% of that food goes to waste. It costs nothing to not waste food, right? You've already bought the food, you already cooked the food. Do not let the leftovers go bad in your fridge. Rearrange the fridge, make a eat it first shelf. Do everything you can to minimize food waste in your home, and then do what you can in your community to minimize food waste in the community. None of that costs any money, right? So that is a huge thing we can do. We can all start right now. There's a local group here called Glean Slow, and they go out to farms where like the harvest is done, but there's still food left in the field, and volunteers will gather it, harvest it, and take it to the food bank. So that food doesn't go to waste in the field. It goes to feed hungry local families. Go ahead, Abby.
Oh, sorry, Brittany. No, I think there's a delay on my end. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was wondering about your thoughts on composting. I know that might be like some people think that's daunting, but
no, just throw it all in a pile.
Yeah, I know.
Just
dig
throw
a
all your
hole.
food scraps in a pile. That's what I do. And I've got a bunch of alpaca poop to contribute to the pile now, which is great. Composting is great. And you can do that no matter if you're in a city with just a front stoop or out here in the country with a couple of very dry acres, right? Anything in between. A lot of cities are actually, I think, or some cities are collecting compost, and they give you a little bucket for the compost, and they collect the compost separate from trash and recycle, and it goes to a citywide composting facility. If that is not the case, your piece of that could be to advocate for a composting program in your city or in your urban area. So yeah, not everyone can make movies or have sheep. What can people learn to support better water practice? So another thing I like to say is just create a relationship with your water. When you turn on your faucet, where does that water come from? It doesn't just come out of the faucet. It comes from somewhere. Mm-hmm. What watershed do you live in? And what are the issues unique to your watershed, and how can you become a steward of that watershed? These are all questions you can start with. We have to think about our watersheds as like a lifeboat. Like, this is your crew. You're all in it together. And a watershed, for those who don't know, wherever the raindrop falls and where it ends up gathering, from the ridge lines of that to the river mouth or the lake, or out, where it connects with the ocean, that's your watershed. And everything that happens in that watershed affects everyone in that watershed. So I'm out here in a closed basin on the Carrizo Plain, right next to the Carrizo Plain National Monument. There's a salt lake out here called Soda Lake. That happens because this is a closed basin, and this watershed does not have an exit, right? So the water is actually a lot like the Salt Lake right near the Jefferson Center. I remember visiting you and I was like, oh. And then when I bought a place out here, I'm like, oh, look at that. That view is a lot like Abby's view. That is cool. So every watershed is different. So the issues here in my watershed are going to be different from the issues, Bobby, in your watershed. And they're going to be different from the issues just over these mountains on one of the coastal watersheds. So we have to get to know the water landscape in which we live. We need to know where our water comes from. We need to have a relationship with our water just so that we can be a better steward of our water, of our watershed, of our community. So those are two things that don't cost any money that make a really, really big difference. I hope that answered the question.
I think it absolutely does. And, you know, you had mentioned earlier the connection between water and soil health. You know, obviously that's why Jefferson Center and, you know, what they're doing with holistic planned grazing was an important storyline for your film. Abby, did you want to talk, just for folks maybe that are not as intimately familiar on the connection between soil health and water health? Did you want to speak to that a little bit of why those are important?
Yeah, I mean, I think Brittany said it really well earlier. I mean, it's all interconnected, right? Animals go across the land, and that may, you know, if they're managed properly, meaning we're getting them at the right time, there to the right place with the right behavior at the right time to create the outcomes that we want, then that's going to stimulate the plant growth, which increases life in the soil. Eisenstein saying that the point of life is to create more life and expand that. And I really see that with holistic management. So when one part of that it becomes healthier, it brings more life to all of it. So the life in the soil abounds when there is healthier animals and moving across the land in a healthy way. And then that brings more biodiversity to the plant community and the animal community and wildlife. And then the cattle get healthier and you have more and more land, more and more forage to support. My business partner, Tony Malmberg, always says that with holistic management, if you're doing your planned grazing, that you double your production in 5 years, which means that you get a second ranch for free. So instead of expanding this way, expanding this way.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Who doesn't want a second ranch for free?
That's cool.
Right.
It's powerful stuff. I noticed this one comment from Donovan over here on the right. I'm not going to bring it up onto the screen because it'll take up all of the screen. So just to read through it quickly. But Donovan is speaking to, you know, the amount of water in the human body, 3 liters, you know, 140 million babies born every year. So, you know, essentially with an increased global population, how are we going to meet water needs? You know, the holistic approach, he's saying, is a good start, but not sufficient. The damage to the hydrological cycle is much larger than this. So how do we increase the amount of water in the hydrosphere without depleting the aquifers?
That's the question, right? That's the question. I personally am childless by choice. That is an option that we have as humans. There are more people using the same amount of water that's always been here. So we have to learn how to do more with less water. We have to learn how to feed ourselves with less water, right? Let's and this goes back to, like, let's ask the people who have been here the longest. I don't have the answers, as well as Chief Sisk has the answers. She's got a lot of really good answers to a lot of things. She's the chief of the Winnemem-Wintu tribe. She's in the film if you've watched it. I think for folks who are joining the conversation who have not yet watched the film, it will be available for the rest of the day today. So make a movie date tonight and get your eyeballs on this film. And what I try to do in the film is present the idea that this is big, right? This is big. This is a big story. This is a big issue. This is the issue. Water is life. Life cannot do life without water.
Yeah.
We cannot do life without water. We will either choose to change or we will be forced to change. And it could be more or less comfortable, more or less uncomfortable, depending on how long we want to be stubborn about continuing to do things the way we think they should be done, because that's how we've been doing them. So centering the voices of Indigenous people is hugely important, and it is well past time for all of us to be doing that, especially when it comes to land, animals, water, soil, ecological processes, relationship, the sacredness of all life. in the film, I try to show that like we need to get beavers back on the landscape. We need to do everything we can to restore healthy salmon populations in the rivers. We need to grow our food with less water. We need to recycle water in places where that's appropriate and possible. Probably there's some desalination in the mix in places where that's appropriate and possible. It's also expensive. So then we zoom out because it also uses energy. So how does that contribute to the other problems we currently have? Everything's connected. We can't talk about, surface water without talking about groundwater. We can't talk about water in the rivers without talking about water in the ocean. We're at a point where we are screwed if we don't get humble, center the voices that have always known how to do this, and try different things, right? Because we just had a gnarly fire season. It's the worst it's ever been. It's the best it's ever going to be. So the time, like all of these things we have heard are coming, they're here now. And this is not like a hypothetical future. The future is here and we can do better. And the reason I wanted to make this film was because like we can do better. There are solutions. The Jefferson Center is showing a very viable solution. How do we grow food and restore water cycles? Amazing. Why are beavers important? Holy crap, because they're little watershed engineers and they slow down the water and they spread it out and they soak it in and they stop the fire. And they support all kinds of other life. So these things are now, they are working their solutions. They can be scaled up. We can all play a role, whether we have money or not, whether we have land or not, or sheep or not. There's something all of us can do. And I wanted this film to be a toolkit. So I hope that addressed Donovan's question. It got a little long. I'm really good at long answers to short questions.
A long answer to a long question, and I think very much appreciated. But it speaks to all the nuance and the complexity. And ultimately, when we're dealing with complex adaptive living systems, which is what the natural world is, it's not black or white, these binary answers of you either do this or you either do that. Everything is connected. It requires a holistic approach and understanding the relationship of everything. It's there's no easy answers to this. I think you find, but there are paths forward.
Yes.
Which is, the beauty of holistic management is holistic management's a decision-making framework. It's not a set of grazing procedures that you must follow to a T. It's a framework for you to figure out what is best for your unique holistic context.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Bobby, I wanted to add something. Is that okay? To what we're proposing. Something that that I was reflecting on when I was reading the question, because there's, you can look at things from like a scarcity and a mentality of like we're running out of things and things are getting smaller and smaller, and so that will trigger a whole set of reactions if you're perceiving our world to be shrinking and our resources to become really scarce. And what I've learned from other hub leaders across the global network is they take this approach of an abundance mindset and what is possible, what could be. And so my friend Jorgen in Sweden, who's one of my mentors, he describes the outcome of his work is regeneration beyond imagination. So that we do not know how much life our world can create, because if we start creating life and it creates more and more and more life in the right way, right, and not in an extractive way, but truly in a regenerative way. And a lot of our hub leaders, when they describe their future resource base, it actually ties back to how things were here before we approached our world with this really industrial mindset of extraction for my benefit at the expense of many others. Mm-hmm. And so like our hub in Oklahoma, Eric Perner, he described his vision is to have, no fences. He hates fences, and have bison roaming everywhere. And his favorite book is The American Serengeti. And I imagine like California, Brittany, where the state that you and I love so much, and when there was grizzly bears in the Bay Area and elk all the way down the San Joaquin Valley, like there was a lot of life here. And what I worry about is that our children are coming into our world in a very, very degraded state. And so but we think that's what it is and that's all it can be. But we all have to realize, like, this is not the maximum potential of what we can create. It's very, very, very degraded right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
I think
you.
that's
Thank you, Abby.
beautiful point. And that's one of the things I really love about the regenerative and holistic management community, from all across the globe, is people do have this abundance mindset of rather seeing the either or, I got to get this or someone else will, having that both and approach and finding these win-win solutions that really address root causes and allow for new potential to be created that we've never even seen before. I think to our hub leader in Arizona, Ricardo. So he's a civil engineer who focuses specifically on hydrologic issues, mainly related to stormwater engineering. Civil engineers normally see stormwater as a nuisance. And so they figure out, how do we, pour concrete and lay pipe and put in pumps and move stormwater from point A to point B so that it's less of a nuisance. Yeah. And through holistic management, he's now seen that stormwater isn't a nuisance, it's a resource. And it can be utilized for good. And so instead of these multi-million-dollar engineering projects, which he has been the engineer on record for in Arizona with his engineering consulting firm, he is now using livestock as the tool that he's doing to deliver on his engineering project. So instead of going out and pouring concrete and laying pipe and all this big expensive infrastructure, he's now going out and setting up some fence, some watering points, and grazing animals over it to show that, well, yeah, we've addressed the stormwater issue. So now instead of running off and hitting the bare soil, which is hard like concrete, and it creates all this erosion and all these other problems, now it's just captured right there in the soil on this land, which helps recharge the underground aquifers. It reduces erosion. Oh, we've got this great source of protein. It's reducing the dust mitigation. Oh, and this project is like magnitudes of order cheaper to implement than the typical centralized expensive infrastructure type. It's this new approach to thinking about the problems we face as humans that I think is so exciting, when people really think of things in a different way and ask questions of how else might this be done. And it requires that abundance mindset. There's that. Yep. You have to have trust that there is enough to go around and that others are doing the good thing as well, just as you are. There's not really a question in that, but I just wanted to ramble on that. So shout out to Ricardo at the Drylands Alliance for Addressing Water Needs, because their organization's name. Dawn, right? Yes, Dawn, D-A-W-N.
Yes.
You guys are great. I mean, I guess everyone tuning into this already knows how awesome the Savory Institute is, but in case you don't, just there's a reason I needed to drive to the tippy top corner of the state of California and include the Jefferson Center in my film about water. It had to be done because this work is so important.
There's other water stories, Brittany, if you want to tell them. I mean, if you go out to Zimbabwe, and these are the photos that Alan shows in his TED Talk.
You're giving me my next film? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, where there once was water, stories from Zimbabwe, and where there now is water.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe that's where it'll be. Because you see the stream that runs through the Africa Center for Holistic Management, and that used to be an ephemeral stream, and now, because of the management that they've done, it flows year round, and Amazing. It's clean water that you can drink out of. I mean, Alan's grandkids are always out there playing in the water. It's just such a beautiful sight. And, that's one example. And I bring it up because a lot of people will be familiar with it from the TED Talk, but that's one of so many stories around the globe of people who are finding new ways to manage land in a way that is maximizing the efficiency of rainwater. Because it's not about the total amount of rainfall that you get, but it's about how you use it and creating those effective water cycles.
Totally. Yeah, I completely agree.
It's interesting too. I mean, we've talked a lot about different dietary choices, and I think it's also important to bring up, like, we're all for the most part, working towards the same end. So like when I was making the choice to, with the information I had, I made the choice to not eat beef in order to save water. My aims were the same as managing cattle in a way to save water. But like then as humans, we get all messy in arguing with each other when actually we're working towards exactly the same end. Our intentions, our vision, what we're trying to accomplish is a healthier life on this planet for ourselves, for each other, for the animals, for the land. So, and I find that with someone of a more, we've joked about the earthy hippie chick flavor that I tend to display. A lot of the ranchers in my area, it has taken them years to be like, oh, she's cool. Oh, hey, Brittany, nice to see you at the Mid-State Fair. Give me a hug. How are you? Took 18 years for some of them.
Wow.
It's because I think we get really stuck in like, here's how I present. Here's what I think. You must be wrong. Everybody else must be wrong. Like, we're not going to solve problems that way. Let's work together. The rancher guys at the Mid-State Fair know a whole lot of things that I don't know, and maybe I know some things that they don't know. And if we can have a conversation about it, maybe we make something brand new and different and wonderful. So to remember that we're all contributing something, and a lot of times we're arguing over the trivial when really we're working towards the same end. I think it's just important to remember that, right?
Oh, I love that, because we see it everywhere. It's this. Left versus right, red versus blue, environmentalist versus rancher, urban versus rural. It's this tribalism and us versus them mentality, which divides and conquers us, when the true potential is us coming together to find solutions. Because if we are going to regenerate our global grasslands and soils and water cycles and create a livable planet for not just us, but for future generations, it's going to take all of us coming together and working on that. And so I love that you've taken such a massive issue as water, as powerful as it is, and made this story of hope for everyone. Because there's something in storytelling where, there's the fear basis of, there's catastrophe and crisis and everything's going wrong. And I think what that does to people is it paralyzes, and it stops them in their tracks, where they're like, God, that's so overwhelming. And we see that a lot right now with eco-anxiety, something that's coming up, especially with the young generation, because they've lived their whole lives just hearing about how climate change is going to destroy the world that they're going to have to find a way to live in for the next, 50, 80, however many years. And so instead of that crisis mode and catastrophe, flipping it on its head and moving to a point, like we were talking about, moving from scarcity to abundance and to a point of hope. And when you do so, I think it allows people to envision themselves in that future place of restored water cycles and regenerating land and healthy, vibrant, abundant communities and people and animals and wildlife. So, it's something that I'm always looking for, is stories of hope. And I'm so glad that you were able to do so with water, because the world so desperately needs it. So thank you.
People are like, you made a documentary film about water that's hopeful? How did you do that?
And in California to boot.
California. You made a California water film that you're saying is hopeful?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, with that, I think perhaps there's the one last question that I just wanted to highlight.
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
People are asking, how do we actually view the movie? So there are some people, if you are a member of the Savory Global Network, you should have received an email with a link to watch it. So that's for Savory Global Network members, but I know that there is a larger public that is watching today and people that will watch this video in the future. So for all of those people, Brittany, how do they watch Where There Once Was Water?
Yeah, so for Savory folks, it'll be available through tomorrow morning, so you can watch it tonight. through that link. For everybody else, the film is currently making quite the rounds in the film festival circuit, which just warms my heart. I worked on this film in total for 7 years. And so to see it having so much success in film festivals is just the best. It's just the best. While a film is hopping around to film festivals, that is the only way you can see it. So for right now, go to my website, wheretherewonswaswater.com/watch. Easy to find. Website's right there. Sorry, Bobby, I didn't give you that little. But there's
Just
a watch
imagine
page.
there's a /watch on that.
Yeah,
everyone.
wheretherewonswaswater.com is the place to find everything about the film. So this is perfect. Go there. I have a resources page that links all of the nonprofits and all of the folks in the film, including the Jefferson Center. So if you want to get more involved with, beavers or ranching or urban farms or the Winnemem-Wintu tribe, there's a whole page for that. But to watch the film, go to the watch page, and I keep that updated with all of the upcoming film festivals where you can find the film. And here is one of the positive aspects of releasing a film during COVID. Many of these film festivals are virtual, so you don't have to go to them. You can watch it from home. So, and a lot of them, usually you can buy a ticket just for the screening of Where There Once Was Water, or you can buy a ticket for the whole festival. So if you just want to see my film, usually it's a $10 or $15 screening cost, and you're buying the ticket from the film festival that's hosting the film. A lot of them are doing a hybrid thing where it's happening in person and also online. So just make sure when you go to the film festival page that you know what you're getting into, so you don't buy a ticket for like a in-person screening in Washington and you're not going to be in Washington. But that is the way. Go to the watch page on my website, and I do try to keep that quite updated. So eventually the film will be available more broadly, but there's a lot of steps between here and there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brittany. Thank you so much, Abby. Any last words that you want to leave before we part ways today?
I just wanted to share I just have this feeling of empowerment. Like, to me, Brittany, you're such a powerful figure, as I said before. And what I remember, this Wendell Berry quote that my friend Jesse McDougall, the hub leader in Vermont, told me that, and I can't remember specifically, it's all Wendell Berry quotes are great, right? And he's such an amazing writer, but it's about how ordinary people should not wait to do the right thing. We just need to step up and do the right thing. And I think a lot of time we're raised with this idea that we need to give power to these institutions that are bigger and better than us. And I think we're learning that that's absolutely not true. And we need to take that power back into ourselves and make our own choices and just step up and do the right thing. And I think, Brittany, you completely embody that and have modeled that for us, how someone was inspired by something and went and did it and transformed yourself. And I think you're such a model for us to do what needs to be done right now. And we can do it.
Oh, thank you, Abby.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Well,
that means a lot.
I think that's the perfect way to leave things. So, Brittany,
Can I throw out a couple things?
Oh, by all means, yes.
Because this film would not be a film without my editor. Really, genuinely, the film would not be a film without Gar. And the more R's you add to the name, the better. Gar. So big love to him. And he's the friend that joined me riding a bicycle across the country as well. So this friendship is deep and now has multiple chapters of water-loving activism attached to it. Gar Russell. And then also the music in the film was a gift of love from Brandon Moss, who is an amazing composer. And he was so compelled by this story and wanted to help and was like, I would like to write music for your film. May I please do that? And it for those of you who have seen it, it really makes all the difference. So much love to both of those gentlemen. The film would not be without them, and it really would not be without Gar, because I wouldn't have had. I've got a lot of staying power, but I don't have that much. So yeah, just lots of love, and then I guess just leave everybody with like the idea of relationship and relationship with each other, relationship with water, relationship with your watershed. Always bring it back to that, this idea of personal relationship with the sacred, with this this element that gives us life. Yeah.
All right.
And thanks for having me. How fun. Let's do this again.
Yeah. Well, let's make another film when
Oh,
we'll review that. No, we'll find another time. We will, regardless of if you make another film or not.
Okay, thank you. That's very
All
kind
right.
of you. Because that
All
might
right,
be
everybody. So the film is Where There Once Was Water. You can watch it at wheretherewonswaswater.com. You can also follow Brittany on Instagram. Here's her handle at Brittany App. If you want to follow Abby and the work she's doing at the Jefferson Center for Holistic Management, you can follow them at jeffersonhub.com. And with that, I'll say thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Abby and Brittany, for the wonderful chat today. And I will see everyone next time. Bye, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.